Again, I'm going to probably upload this as the third video, where he discussed things of healthcare, run properly, about solutions, and it wasn't just the healthcare for all, Medicare for all, Medicaid for all. He actually talked about certain things you need to do. He actually talked about, the comment that I caught is Medicaid done right could be the best. And other than what I would call generic knowledge of Medicare and Medicaid, I would actually have to study it to understand what that comment was. So I give kudos to, a 15-minute interview where the person actually explains things and covers things in more details to places like the Young Turks. So one, I think it is needed because right now the mainstream isn't giving you reporting like this. Okay. Now, like I said, I differ on policy issues, and I also want to discuss what I call the big lie. And again, I'm not going to make Ben hurt here, so I'm just going to come to it. If you actually listen to progressives on economics and economic development, they highlight FDR, the New Deal, and they highlight Reagan as changing so many things in progressive values. So the assumption is the New Deal succeeded in pulling us out of the Great Recession back in the 30s under FDR, President in 33, implemented the New Deal 33, sat for 4 terms before dying in office in World War II, that was successful in solving the problem. When you actually look at the economic data, and when I wasn't there, okay, were there big problems being driven by lack of oversight of markets? Absolutely they were. And again, I'm not making an epic. I'm not going to go in now to the history of what happened in the Great Depression and how it was exacerbated and how Hoover and the Office of the Comptroller just took horrible situation and made it substantially worse. Okay. But the key is the FDR's New Deal. Some of it still exists today, but it did not pull the economy out of the Great Depression. World War II did, the preparation for World War II. The economy was still in negative numbers when he first took office. It slightly improved, but I think was shrinking at minus 4% for his first 2 years. It then recollapsed, I think 2 years at the midterm. Then it improved slightly again, not quite minus 4%. He was reelected, and then it tanked again, down I think a 7% in 37 and 38. What pulled the U.S. out was helping build Germany up. Unfortunately, we did that through our industrial abilities, and then basically supplying World War I, where we entered in 41, I believe. You look at that and you go, it was the war 8 years later that pulled us out of the Great Depression. Now, did everything Roosevelt do, was it all a catastrophe? No. I mean, creation, the SEC Act of 33 and 34, Glass-Steagall is debatable on how successful that was. There were laws governing mutual funds, the Tennessee Valley Authority, creation of Social Security. At least the concept of what it was then may have worked versus what it has become. But in pulling the United States out of the Great Recession, it wasn't the New Deal. The second thing is the discussion of Ronald Reagan and how you always get the feeling that everything was so peachy keen wonderful in 1980 and then Reagan stepped in. If you go back to the election results, 84, Reagan was elected winning 49 states. He was elected winning 44 states in 80, and people seem to forget that John Anderson was a conservative Republican out of my state of Illinois. He took 9% of the vote. Had Anderson not run as a third party, maybe Reagan wins 49 states too. Why? because things were economically abysmal. And a lot of it, when Jimmy Carter ran and he had 15% short-term interest rates, 18%, 18% short-term, 15% long-term rates, 18% prime rate. Imagine today trying to buy a house and paying an 18% mortgage, or an 11% mortgage, 13% mortgage. What are they now, 4? Imagine trying to do that. Imagine trying to buy a car at that level, or a dishwasher. So basically business was stopped. The difference between what Reagan stepped into and what Obama stepped into is Obama still had an industrial base, and he had a lot of successful companies with lots of cash around. There were companies who were able to bail things out and help support the economy. Okay? 1980, we were losing entire industries. Towns were shutting down. Ask somebody from Allentown, Billy Joel's fantastic song. Where'd that come from? That came from 1979. That came from Allentown Steel Mill shutting down. Kenosha, Wisconsin, the AMC plant shut down. And this not only shut down the town from that standpoint, it also shut down all the support, the companies that supported it, the restaurants where people lived. Okay? Reagan happened because the economic policy, starting with Kennedy, Johnson, and you'd say, well, okay, but then you had Nixon, who was a Republican. Nixon wasn't much of an economic Republican. And then Carter, okay? 20 years of those policies. And in fact, what people forget is 1969. We had the great savings and loan bailout under Bush 41. Well, there was the original savings and loan bailout in 1969 that Nixon walked into, because of the progressive policies of Kennedy and Johnson. And suddenly we had a thing that nobody could explain called stagflation, which was high unemployment and very high interest rates. And Reagan did not have companies like Microsoft, Oracle, Facebook. We hadn't gotten there yet under Reagan. So when people sit there and say, well, Reagan came in and messed everything up, I would tend to say Reagan bailed us out of what we view as the death spiral that we were in back in 1980. And now we're repeating it again. We are at that same point, it seems, again. Okay? So when people give you the lie that everything was wonderful and Reagan came and messed it up, and I've heard a number of progressive pundits talk about that, and I have also heard people talk about how Reagan reversed things. Yes, he reversed an economic death spiral. That seems to evade a lot of the discussions of the progressives. And again, a little truth and honesty here with reporting. I'm not saying I'm blowing off progressive policies. Guess what? We do have issues with banks. Because of Dodd-Frank, the big have gotten bigger, and because of Dodd-Frank, we have now codified too big to fail. The government will bail them out. And we've taken all the small banks and made it a lot harder for them to even exist. And what don't they do now? They don't loan money that doesn't add to small business growth, which is how the U.S. economy has flourished and created the strongest middle class, I think, in the world. Okay? You want to debate me on that? Fine, because the middle class is shrinking, and some of it is because of our own government rules. Okay? Do not sit back and say the progressive method, single payer, is the way. Single payer what? For what? All insurance? All private insurance? All private health care goes away? Let's not fund, religious hospitals because they don't offer certain care. Supply and demand, that law has never been repealed. So to that extent, when I turn to my progressive friends and progressive enemies, I probably have, your point of wage issues in healthcare is correct. Your solutions have actually proven to make matters worse. And that's the debate I really think we should have. And it's a debate we should have openly. And that's, as I said, that's why I still watch progressive, the alternative media, I guess is the term. I think it's important. I think it's to be there. But again, it was quoted to give Reagan the statement, but I believe I heard was maybe Ed Meese. You're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. Okay? I really think, especially to the younger people, I'm 50 plus. I'm here, hopefully for 20 or 30 years. But right now, who's it going to affect? It's going to affect you. And as I said when I was back in the States, and talking to, some younger people about what they understand, flat out, I said, people my age are going to turn to you and say, hey, thank you for bailing us out of our health care. And it is now on your back if you continue with things like the Affordable Care Act. So, let's have the discussions of what we need to solve. Let's line up the alternatives. There are solutions out there. Let's see what works. The long and the short of things, those are the discussions we need to have. But let's be honest in our facts. So, peace, love, and rock and roll. And you may see me again, and then again, you may not.